Are Israelis committing genocide in Gaza in our war against Hamas? That's certainly what we're being accused of. In January, the government of South Africa formally charged Israel with genocide before the World Court in The Hague. What's more, South Africa says that more than 50 other countries around the world, including, of course, the Palestinian Authority, are standing with them in full solidarity, calling Israel a genocidal enemy. A senior official in the United Nations, who's in charge of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, is also formally accusing Israel of committing genocide against the Palestinians. But not everyone agrees. U.S. President Joe Biden, for example, has categorically rejected the accusation, even though he does have significant disagreements with the Israeli government, with Prime Minister Netanyahu, on how best to prosecute the war. What's happening in Gaza is not genocide, President Biden said on May 20th, 2024, during remarks at the White House. We reject that allegation, he said. Some of Biden's most virulent critics are calling him Genocide Joe. Why? Because he supports Israel in its war against the Hamas terrorist organization. But the president insists that Israel is engaged in a just war of self-defense against the Hamas terror group. Yes, the number of Palestinians who have died is tragically high, Biden has conceded over the past several months in various statements, but this is because, he says, Hamas has embedded itself inside the civilian population in Gaza and has been firing rockets at Israel, at Israeli civilians, from hospitals, schools, playgrounds, apartment buildings, mosques, and other civilian centers, not because Israel is trying to kill civilians. None of this, he argues, is evidence that Israel is committing genocide. To the contrary, Biden says the American people and the American government stand shoulder to shoulder with the people and government of Israel to defeat Hamas and liberate the Palestinians of Gaza from Hamas's cruel tyranny. We stand with Israel to take out Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar and the rest of the butchers of Hamas, Biden continued in his speech at the White House. We want Hamas defeated. We're working with Israel to make that happen. The leaders of other countries, such as Canada, the United Kingdom, and even Germany, have also rejected the argument that Israel is committing genocide. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, for example, believes that the South African case is completely unjustified and wrong. The government of Germany is strongly rejecting the allegation that Israel is committing genocide or that the German government is aiding and abetting Israel in committing genocide. Berlin's defense of Israel is particularly noteworthy. Why? Because in the 1940s, Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler, itself was guilty of committing genocide against the Jewish people in what became known as the Holocaust. What exactly does genocide mean? Here's the official definition contained within the United Nations official Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, commonly known as the Genocide Convention. Quote, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. This important element of international law was adopted by the UN on December 9, 1948, shortly after World War II. Why? Well, in specific reaction to the Nazis' war crimes in the Holocaust and the related and ghastly war crimes the German government and military committed under the reign of terror of Adolf Hitler. Now, the key word in the law is intent. In his book, Mein Kampf, Hitler was explicit in his intention to exterminate the Jewish people. In numerous other official Nazi documents, senior German officials also made it crystal clear their intention was to wipe out the Jewish people in whole or in part. By sharp contrast, the Israeli government has no intention, desire, plan, or reason to destroy the Palestinian people. Now, engaging in war itself, especially in a war of self-defense, is not genocide. Indeed, Article 51 of the UN Charter specifically states that, quote, "Nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations." And this is exactly what Israel is engaged in right now, a war of self-defense. Yes, the war in Gaza is terrible and tragic. Yes, the damage and destruction that has been wrought on Israeli communities near Gaza and on Palestinian communities in Gaza has been horrible. The suffering that civilians on both sides have had to endure because of a war that Hamas started, a war that Hamas invited, a war that Hamas continues to perpetrate grieves me, as it does anyone with a shred of humanity and compassion. But again, a war of self-defense is not only legal under international law, a war of self-defense is the obligation of, indeed, a moral necessity for legitimate sovereign governments to defend their people from barbaric attacks. What then is the simplest, clearest, easiest case to make to defend Israel against such false and slanderous charges? You may be getting these attacks at your office or at school or even at church or other places where people are saying, how can you defend Israel when they're committing genocide? Israel's not committing genocide, but let me give you a few ideas on how you can respond in a very simple and clear way. First, it's important to point out that Israel has actually done more to protect Palestinian civilians during its military operations in wartime than any other military in the world has ever done during times of war. After the Hamas invasion of Israel on October 7th, for example, in which Hamas terrorists murdered 1,200 Jews, including shooting mothers in front of their children, children in front of their parents, beheading Jews, raping Jews, and burning entire Jewish families alive in their homes, after Hamas took more than 250 people hostage and dragged them into those terror tunnels in Gaza, Israel would have been justified if its military had invaded the Gaza Strip immediately to hunt down and destroy Hamas terrorists. Instead, Israel actually waited 3 weeks. Now, part of that reason was that they were mobilizing reservists and getting them trained and ready to go into Gaza. But the IDF was also moving tanks and other materiel to the Gaza border. But during that time, they began warning Palestinian civilians in northern Gaza constantly and in every possible way that Israel was about to invade. Israel sent text messages, phone calls, dropped 15 million printed leaflets to warn civilians of imminent invasion by the IDF and give them maps and instructions in Arabic, of course, where to go to find humanitarian safe zones. That's not what a genocidal army would do. The Nazis in World War II certainly didn't give Jews in Europe any warning that they were coming to exterminate them. The Nazis didn't tell Jews where to go to be safe from Hitler's genocidal kill squads and death camps like Auschwitz. Instead, the Nazis attacked the Jews without warning and murdered 6 million Jews. 1 out of every 3 Jews on the planet at that time, and the Nazis would have killed every Jew on the planet if they could, if they hadn't been stopped by the world's military alliance against them. Or go to Cambodia in the 1970s, Pol Pot, the genocidal tyrant of Cambodia. He certainly didn't warn his enemies, his own people that he hated, that he didn't love, for sure, that he was about to go on a murderous rampage. Pol Pot didn't tell his victims that they could go find some safe haven someplace. Instead, he sent the Khmer Rouge communist terrorists into the killing fields of Cambodia to murder 3 million helpless Cambodians. That is genocide, not what Israel is doing in Gaza. But here's a second point that you can make to show your friends or neighbors or just people who want to challenge you that Israel is not engaged in genocide in the Gaza Strip. Israel is making sure that food, water, and medical supplies are entering Gaza to save the lives of those Palestinian civilians who are caught in this terrible war zone that Hamas has created. This is important because it's not just that Israel is showing people how to get to safety and how to find food and water and medical supplies. Israel is facilitating the arrival into Gaza of mass amounts of food, water, medical supplies, and so forth. Between October 7th and May 20th, more than 15,000 trucks have brought more than 280,000 tons of humanitarian relief aid into Gaza with the help of the Israeli military. In fact, the Israeli military is making it possible for more than 1,000 trucks a week to bring food, water, medical supplies, and other humanitarian relief into Gaza. Israel has also made it possible for Arab and European countries to drop humanitarian aid into Gaza by air. And the Israeli military has made it possible for the United States military to build a special pier on the Gaza coast to bring humanitarian relief supplies into Gaza by sea. In May of 2024 alone, the United States brought in more than 560 tons of aid into Gaza through its temporary floating pier, according to the Pentagon. This is what Israel's doing, but that's not what a genocidal country would do. People committing genocide don't move heaven and earth to get food, water, and medical supplies, as well as tents and clothes and heaters in the winter and other critically needed supplies to their enemies. But this is exactly what Israel is doing. A third point, Israel has the military capability to kill every person in Gaza, but is not using such overwhelming force. Why not? Because Israel isn't trying to kill the people of Gaza. We're not trying to kill civilians at all. Israel's trying to protect civilians by warning them. And Israel is only trying to capture or kill every Hamas terrorist that poses a clear and present danger to the safety and security of Israeli civilians, but are also posing a clear and present danger to Palestinian civilians. This war would not be happening if Hamas had not set it into motion and was not continuing it by fighting Israel every single day. A fourth point, Israel even provides medical care for Palestinian terrorists. Even when Hamas terrorists have been captured by Israel over the years, we don't execute them. We put them in prison, and when they need medical care, Israel provides it. Did you know, for example, that when Yahya Sinwar, the main Hamas leader in Gaza today, the man who was the mastermind of the October 7th invasion and massacre of 1,200 Israelis, when Yahya Sinwar faced cancer while he was serving time in an Israeli prison for terrorism, Israeli doctors actually treated him. In fact, Israeli doctors and nurses saved the life of Yahya Sinwar. And then Israel went on to release Sinwar and let him go back to Gaza in a prisoner exchange to get back one Israeli who had been held hostage in Gaza for years. If Israel was engaged in genocide against the Palestinians, would we have saved the life of Yahya Sinwar or set him free and sent him back to Gaza? A fifth and final point. For years, Israel has been giving work permits to Palestinian civilians in Gaza so they could enter Israel legally, get good jobs, especially those in construction, to make money to care for their families back in Gaza. Now, tragically, a number of those workers who worked in Israel began gathering intelligence on Israeli families who lived along those borders and gave that intelligence to Hamas so they could pull off their barbaric attack on October 7th. But think about that, the fact that Israel has made it possible over many, many years for Palestinians to come in from Gaza, a very dangerous area, to come into Israel to work. Does a nation that's trying to eradicate and annihilate its neighbors provide them such opportunities to work and to make money in Israel? Of course not. But Israel has done this because we are a nation trying to live at peace with our neighbors, not commit genocide. Let's be clear. Hamas is explicitly and proudly a terrorist organization that wants to commit genocide against Israel. Read their 1987 charter. They don't hide their desire to kill and destroy all Jews and wipe Israel off the map. What's more, one of their leaders actually said this on television shortly after October 7th. Quote, "The Al-Aqsa flood is just the first time, and there will be a second and a third, a fourth, because we have the determination, the resolve, and the capabilities to fight against Israel." Make no mistake, Israel is not trying to commit genocide. Hamas is. Israel should not be on trial for genocide. Hamas should be. That's the truth, one worth knowing and sharing with everyone who will listen.